Thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Going to be showing this cool graphic made by Jenny V. So let's take a look. It should be my downloads now. Where do your airdrops go?
Did it go to the download folder?
No. Can you airdrop it again real quick?
Yeah.
I don't know if it But anyway, thanks for tuning in. We are live now. I'm checking. Yep. So if anyone say hi all in the chat. Okay. Anyone wants to, okay. Save to downloads. There we go. I didn't click it. Okay. Receiving. And so this is for gate 41. I'm just going to show it on the screen, and then I'll let you take it away and tell us what it is we are looking at. 1 second here. Okay, that's quite the large image. Jeez. Well, we didn't really.
It's just the.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, I'll put a video on top of it. I'll put a little video. You know, I've said this a bunch of times. So
Can you just
set it to the
focus the camera onto the screen?
like fit to size of the window?
No, it doesn't fit to size. That's not how OBS works. Somebody's not a streamer, so don't worry. I have had plenty of experience streaming. I know exactly how to do this. This is exactly what you do
technical
to stream.
difficulties. It's
No, it's not a technical
it's a
difficulty. I knew
third
you were going to do
minute.
this. It's a gigantic image. This is just.
This is
I'm
my
just streaming.
fault.
No.
No,
I'm just
it needs to be
streaming. Look, it's
big,
perfect.
especially if you're going to reproduce them.
Look at that. That's beautiful. Look at this. Gate 41.
Can you zoom out a little even more?
You want me to zoom? Yeah, you want me to actually get the whole thing on there? Okay. There we go.
Oh,
Yeah, that looks
no, it's all distorted now.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There. Perfect.
Yep. Okay. So this is gate 41, the gate of contraction. And it's a gate of limitation. These are the limitations of the platform. You know, we're on a platform that is limited in certain ways.
That's perfect,
And,
actually. Yeah,
this
because
is one of the
yeah.
limitations.
we moved from gate 60, gate of limitation, to gate 41, which we still have our limitations.
Well, yeah, it's a different kind of limitation. It's not really it's the gate of contraction, decrease.
Yes. Well, let me explain what's on the screen to the viewers in YouTube land. So this is the start of a project called Journey Around the Wheel, where each week I am personally focusing on each sun gate and creating these cards to be able to reference them and have a collection at the end of the year. And starting with 41, because 41 is the beginning of the Rave New Year. And it's the initiatory start codon within DNA. And so really what's happening is it's, I think where did it talk about this? Like when gate 41 hits, all of humanity is undergoing a physiological process. And so it's really interesting to think about. I don't know much about like that in particular, like what the physiological process is.
It's a little quiet. Can you talk into the microphone more directly? You might have to just sit a little closer to it, or I can move this closer. Here, I'll just move this closer. You just have to talk into the microphone. The YouTube people are saying that microphone is a little quiet.
Oh, okay. Let's see. All right. Thanks, Lindley.
Yeah, Linnell Syntagros. Star code activation. Hello. That is Jenny V. Jenny V is showing off gate 41 cards that she made. This is for Everyone is Different, Journey Around the Wheel.
Intro, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Jenny V. We also have Mike, and we also have Amber. So today, if you look in the description, we're going to be looking. We're starting off, and we'll probably be starting off each week with the Journey Around the Wheel. So we're just going to be looking at the gates that the wheel starts with. And we're basically going to be. I mean, so this is the new year. So this is basically the start. Hopefully, we'll do this every week. Some weeks are going to have 2 gates, just because that's the nature of it.
Right.
Because the gates take 5.7 days. But yeah, so this is the graphic for gate 41, and I like it. I like it a lot. I want this as a real deck of cards. Which.
Right.
You don't have yours with you. Next
I
week.
do not,
We know.
no.
Okay, next week.
Yeah.
We know. Amber made a fantastic set of flashcards. So I think that the world.
This is much more advanced.
Well, I mean, this is very graphical, but honestly, every kind of card. All I have is the Linda Bunnell cards, and they're fine. But I think flashcards are great. Informational cards, divinational cards, anything really. They're all good.
And graphic design and art is my background, so this is just a way for me to process and get to know this information a little bit more, and with like having Human Design Catalyst and then this group that we have, it's nice to have a little bit of structure to just kind of kick off the week and inspire conversation from it. But so with these cards in particular, wanting to just hone in on all of those specific details, and we can find these in lots of different books. I have 4 books right in front of me that have these displayed, but it's nice to kind of see them all together, and it's a seed for a lot of inspiration and investigation. Like, for example, learning about the Godhead for 41, which is Keepers of the Wheel. I didn't know anything about Keepers of the Wheel. And I was like, that's such an interesting thing.
Yeah, that's Mike's Godhead. So I'm going to tilt the camera here a little bit. And all right, you're on there, Mike.
You know anyone who looks like this? They might be a keeper of the wheel.
He's a keeper of the wheel. He's the embodiment of the keepers of the wheel. That's what he's doing.
There you go. Good point of reference.
Have you, just real quick, have you heard Ra's talk in the Keepers of the Wheel?
No.
Okay, that is really cool. I was listening to it. We were listening the other night. It's in the Godhead's quarter by quarter lectures, and basically, what he says is the Keepers of the Wheel are kind of, this is not his words, more my paraphrasing it, but they're kind of like the Agent Smiths of the world. They're kind of, everyone has this feeling that there's got to be some secret power somewhere. That's the Keepers of the Wheel. That's you guys. You guys are the secret power. You're the secret instruments, keeping it all together, keeping it all turning. So, the Keepers of the Wheel. It's, yeah, I mean, I wish I'd retained more from the talk. It was kind of just on in the background, but I'll have to return to it. But
Well, I had that interesting bit about having to die, like, because it's at the beginning, the start and beginning. So, like, the process of death and birth.
Oh yeah. Ra was saying that anyone who really is going to enter into human design and kind of go through any of these processes, because Keepers of the Wheel really speaks to just processes in general, just wheels and cycles, and that anyone who really enters into it, they're going to have to contend with their own death. And the first thing they're going to have to contend with is the fact you don't really get to die. You die in this form and you go on to another form. It's the wheel. It keeps going, that there's something after death. There's another cycle. There's another life and another, and it just keeps going. But then the other thing he was saying, just kind of talking about how we relate to death, was that really anyone who enters into human design is going to have a death, sort of death of their not self. I actually was reminded of My Dinner with Andre, that great Louis Malle film. Have you seen that? Do you all know that one? Okay. Well, it's in it. Andre Gregory, the protagonist, or maybe I don't really know, but I guess the main character is kind of Wally's character. But in any case, yeah. So in that show, in that film, Andre is, what are you doing?
Just going back to OBS.
Okay. Well, anyway, we have to be careful not to move the mic too much. It'll make a lot of. But anyway, in it, he has a whole death ritual. He goes through a death ritual. He loses his old name. He loses his old. I mean, he actually does come out of it believing that he has a new name and that he is a different person. So it's just kind of interesting, maybe the keeper of the wheel is sort of the keeper of the mystery of the wheel in some sense as well.
But if you're the keeper of the wheel, are you really participating in it? Like, or are you just like more on the outskirts of it? Like,
I mean, to really understand it, you have to look at the incarnation crosses, and then you have to look at what's specific to that form of it, because there'll be 4 forms of every right angle incarnation cross, 2 forms of every left angle incarnation cross. And the fact is, for the keepers of the wheel, it only has one left angle, it only shares its left angle crosses with one other Godhead. So you can look at those incarnation crosses. For instance, Mike is a cross of the Alpha, and it's going to only share that with your opposite gate, right? Which is, we can check on here, polarity 31, easy. We can see, and so, only people born on gate 31 and only people born on gate 41 are going to be the alphas of the world, really. And keepers of the wheel are half of the alphas of the world, because Mike is a cross of the alpha.
The other halves are mots. Whoever
Yeah.
that is, I don't know any more about them.
You don't know about the Godhead Mott, but but you can see that when you get into the Godheads, what you're really looking at. And so for those who maybe...
I also want to...
Yeah.
Let me make sure I have this right. Keepers are 61, 60, 41, 19. You think is that right?
Oh, sorry, you're asking me a question? Yeah.
61, 60, 41, and 19. Are those the keepers?
I don't know. I can't do it off the top of my
I can
head,
find
but
out through this picture that I took.
Nice.
So if your thing is right with the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah,
61
16.
through 19.
Cool.
Yeah, those are the Godheads, Yeah, and that's something interesting. So the Godheads are really, for those who might not be familiar with it, that's what I started to say, is that the Godheads, there are 16 of them, and human design does not really follow any of the Godheads. Human design does not, like, the encounter that Ra had with the voice was not an encounter with the Godhead, which is always interesting, because I've had people tell me they've had, even our friend who I talked to on YouTube coming up, had a near-death experience where he got to meet the Creator. But if it's a male Creator God, it's probably one of the 16 Godheads, because not that there aren't female personifications of them, but there's, obviously there are the female Godheads in there, but they're very much of the Yang principle. Each of the Godheads represents one aspect, which is why it's so funny. It's almost a joke. Like, there's a funny twist in human design where on the one hand it's yin knowledge, and we're talking about personality crystals, and there's no real personality crystals yet. That's one of the mysteries, is that these are almost like proto-personality crystals. They're personality crystals in form, And then on the other hand, there is a sense where we're talking about the wheel, no matter how yin it gets, it's still what's programming the mind. It's still the a programming agency against the form knowledge and against. So I guess we could at least just say that there are both personality and design implications for each of these gates. But it's just one of the more unusual parts of human design when you really get into it and you start to look at it in a deep way, and you start to realize that the gates are really programming agencies. These are programming agencies. I mean, Ra tells us our Godhead not so we can obey. He urges us to break the covenant with the Godhead. He says basically, this is sort of our potential of what we embody, but at the same time, to really be your own unique person, who knows what that's going to look like? And it's interesting because I think in the seven-centered, in the former world, we really were waiting for the incarnations of the Godhead. We were waiting for the genius. Now we get to be geniuses in some sense. We get to be our own, It's like the Bucky Fuller quote. He said, we're born geniuses, and the process of living de-geniuses people. So. Well, Mike, you were pointing out that the Godheads, and this is an interesting point as well. I guess we can't quite, I don't know if this will be able to, maybe I'll go ahead and make this a little bit larger now.
Maybe you could highlight in the hexagram.
Well, I just want to, for a second, open this up again, and then I just wanted to point out, this was, or actually I guess we have the book here too, either way. Let's see if this will show. So we have the hexagrams here, and what you'll find is we're talking about 41 right here. And you'll see that the row that it's on, the 61, 60, 41, 19, those are the keepers of the wheel. And the middle two, this is what Mike was talking about a little bit earlier before we started recording. The middle two are yin. But the bottom two are yang, because the quarter is the double yang quarter. You can see it starts with the godhead of Hades, 1, 43, 14, and 34. And those are all four yang. The bottom two are yang and the middle two are yang. And then you get the four variations on the top. But as soon as you get over to the keepers of the wheel, you can see that it's the most yin of the yang quarter in that sense. See, it has the double yin in the middle. And so this is something that Mike was talking about. Maybe you can explain that, Mike. You were just saying that each godhead is not only typified by its bottom, by its quarter. Obviously, it's the combination of the quarter and of the middle two lines. Right? So it's kind of, you can see the godheads in a different way. So you were saying, like, for instance, double yin is base 3, right? Double yang is base 1. So we could see this, we could see the keepers of the wheel as base 3 within base 1. The body within movement, or something like that, right? For those who are studying base theory, which is a very advanced part of human design, of course.
You could see anything that's further towards the top of the hexagram is more of an extension. So you could see that 41 would be the design extension of the principle of form, which itself being an extension here of movement. So the design part of the form part of movement, you could say.
I see. And you're doing this, I'm going to actually show the image again. Let me shrink this back down. So what you're saying is, if we look at the hexagram for 41, the bottom two lines, movement.
Movement is the motif.
The middle two lines are the body. And then the top two are design.
Right.
That's base 4. Yeah, and this is just translating. So for people who aren't following this, if you're watching, this gets into base theory, and this is following that base 1 is double yang. So you see the two yang lines on the bottom is base 1. That's called movement. The middle two lines are yin, and that's the body. That's base 3. And then the top two are yin yang, or yang in the service of yin, which is base 4, which is the design.
Now, can I mention another piece of trivia?
Absolutely.
If you were to go all the way around the wheel and follow just the middle base, the middle one that defines the Godhead, right? It wouldn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. You know, so there it's asymmetrical, which means, so
Whoa.
I was saying earlier that both Jonah and I are born in Godheads that represent, whose middle bigram is the opposite of the bottom base. So, in this case, the double yin part of double yang, and in your case, the yang yin part of yin yang, right?
Right, so it's kind of like being a little bit opposite. Like we're kind of in, like I'm the Jesus Godhead, and it's a little bit like he's like Jesus with the sword in this one, because he's like he's a little bit opposite of what you would expect for duality.
Wow, that's interesting.
Well, and so you would expect those to be crosses then, but they're not, are they? You were born in a cardinal sign, I was born in a fixed sign, so there's no way that we could be on a cross. And it's because of that asymmetry in the order of the middle bases that you have keepers of the wheel and Mott and Michael and Jesus as the two. So it's not a perfect cross, it's a little off. You see, it's not like this, it's like that. I just think it's kind of...
That's really interesting.
Isn't that a little weird? Because it reminds me of just like that, you know, that jaggedness in general when you go around the wheel and look at the 88 degrees rather than the 90 degrees. The fact that things kind of step along the wheel.
Yeah, the stepping, it's interesting. I saw this pattern earlier today when I was programming, because I've been doing a lot of human design programming lately, and I was writing out the opposite gates, and by the time you get to gate 33, you've started, or, you know, I guess not quite... not the number 33, by the time you get to the 33rd gate, you've already done the opposites one way, you're just doing it the other way, and so you end up with this kind of, you end up with some interesting symmetrical patterns. But it seems like when you're doing things with the wheel, because the wheel is a mirror image, that's where you get some really interesting things. I mean, it is a perfect mirror. One half of the wheel is an exact reflection of the other half. So if you take the wheel and you just only take half the wheel, and then you were just to write an inverse function to invert, you get the other half. I mean, everything, this is just like 1 and 2 is fully yang and then fully yin. So it is interesting what you're saying is, there are some asymmetrical pieces in there, or it's more just like when you're looking at how they relate, they are mirror image, but you're right, they're not just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 through the middle.
It creates another hemisphere that I didn't realize was there, because I always think of the hemisphere of two and three, quarters 2 and 3, civilization and duality being the fully incarnate hemisphere where everything begins with yin, and then the mutation initiation hemisphere is being disincarnate and beginning always with yang. But there's a secret other hemisphere that is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, because they agree on the order of the godheads within them.
I mean, I think that is a little bit confusing to people. So
it was a pretty strange thing I said. That's true.
I also don't know if it.
But I mean, because if you were to divide the wheel in two, you'd do it the way that I would, right? Where you have the two relatively disincarnate quarters, and then you have the two relatively incarnate quarters. You have civilization, the building of the world, and duality, relationship. The fully present, fully in the world quarters. And then you have the two, one of which is preparing for death and one of which is preparing for life, that are a little disincarnate.
Let's take a step back here. I think
okay.
we skipped, I think you skipped ahead a way of kind of stuff. Okay, so first of all, what is Mike talking about? He is talking about the wheel. No. Seriously, because you can't just jump into, like, I know what you're talking about, but just barely. Like, I can barely follow what you're saying. Like, with a tiniest little bit of, like, tenacity. So I think to start with, we're saying that the wheel is very mysterious. So first of all, the wheel, let me just see if I can find a good graphic of the wheel, because we have this graphic of Gate 41, that's great, but we're talking so much about the wheel.
Yeah,
I can send a simple line art one.
Well, yeah, because we're talking so much about the wheel, I think that this has kind of gone afield.
While you're doing that, Jenny can go back to the
No. This is going to be way too confusing. People are really kind of overwhelmed, because I think there's a lot of information here and all different kinds of information. Nobody really understands. Okay, so I'm just going to put the wheel on here. We're going to start at the beginning. We're not going to switch anything until people at least know what the wheel is. Okay. So, let's see. That looks great. Okay. Oh, it's not letting me. It's redirecting. Okay, 1 second. Jovian Archive doesn't like me stealing their images. Thank you, Jovian. I downloaded it first. Okay, so here we go. So thank you, Jovian. This is the wheel. All of these gates going around, and basically we are right now. I'm going to zoom in a little bit if I can. We are in gate 41. Yeah, see gate 41 there, kind of in the middle. That's gate 41. That's where we are in the wheel. I'm going to zoom back out. So I think this was confusing some people. It's because we started talking about the wheel. First of all, this is our weekly human design meetup group. We just stream for people to be able to tune in. So we're kind of mainly doing this as a human design meetup group anyway.
On AirDrop?
Yes, I am, yeah. And so, that's part of it. Yeah, and if you have another one, okay, nice.
That one is like the Godhead specifically.
Oh, perfect. This will be great. Okay, wait, can you try one more time? It's not.
It says sent. Or can you do it?
Can you? Yeah, I didn't send to the right place. There we go. Okay. Yeah, and so this wheel, is very mysterious. Like, we're talking about gate 41 now, which is one part of the wheel. That's how we started this whole thing, because that's where we are in it. If you're familiar with astrology, you'll see that we're right at the beginning of Aquarius. We just got out of Capricorn. So if you see the Aquarius and the Capricorn signs there, we're in gate 41 right now. The sun is in gate 41, moving around the wheel. And this next image I'm going to show, thank you, Mike, for sending that. Let me make sure it's the right one. Oh, perfect. Okay, this will be great. So this is, it looks a little bit distorted.
It's an egg for some reason.
Let me just, well, it's okay. It's okay. I can fix it.
There's also one error there where Mott should be double young.
Okay, well, let's let's just at least, why is this so distorted like this? I can't really fix it.
It's warped. I don't know.
Okay,
That's how
well
it came
that's
to
fine.
me.
That's
Oh,
fine.
that's the right one.
That's
Then.
all
Okay, it's not really letting me. It's kind of not letting me resize it. Anyway, okay, so this is the image. So this will at least show kind of the idea where each section of the wheel is, fundamentally divided, and these are divided into quarters. This graphic in the center is showing sort of the rave cosmological reasons behind it. So we won't really go into what the center and the dog are. I mean, it's really the camel and the dog. I don't know why it says center there.
I think the camel's the negative space around the center, right?
Oh, that's the camel, right? Okay. Well, anyway, these are just names that Ra has given to a highly complex subject, which, for people who are interested in this, highly recommend looking into rave cosmology. But the nice part is this at least gives us the names of the godheads. So we have keepers of the wheel here. This is where we are. You'll notice, let me see if I can kind of zoom it in a little bit. It's because it's such a small graphic here. So there's the keepers of the wheel. And you can see we're in gate 41, so we're a little past halfway through keepers of the wheel. It started in gate 61, then it went to gate 60, and then gate 41, right at the beginning of gate 41, right in the middle of the keepers of the wheel is the actual new year. It's kind of interesting. The actual, we could call it the physical new year, the real new year, not the made-up new year that happens on December 31st at the stroke of midnight, but the real new year that happens the 21st or the 22nd, depending on time zone and, depending on if it's a leap year and stuff like that. And that is when the sun moves into gate 41. So here we can see the keepers of the wheel. Yeah, it's interesting. They are being shown. Actually, so this is saying it's actually Thoth or Thoth, depending how you say it. Oh, I see. This is what you mean by the offset. The keepers of the wheel is yin yin, but then why does it show Thoth as yin yin?
Oh, that's not opposite. Opposite would be Mot.
I know, but why does it show it like that?
And the Mot has an error, so it's a weird example. It's the only, of all the 16 it's showing, that's the only one where they mess up the binary.
So it should
that should
actually
be double yang.
It should be double yang,
Yeah,
so it should be exactly opposite.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. Okay, that's good.
Look at any of the other pairs and you'll see.
Right. Okay, so Hades, which has gate 1, I see. There's Hades, and
Double
then if we
yang.
go to the opposite, it should be double yin.
Maya.
Exactly. Okay, so that's great. Okay, so this kind of clears it up. I'm going to remove that. So just the next time you're looking at this graphic, this wheel, this wheel doesn't really show it as much, but if you actually look at the hexagrams, you can see these patterns, and you can see, the patterns based on the quarters, and then you can see the pattern Mike is talking about in the middle. And I think that this is where people were getting a little bit lost, is we were kind of talking about just some of the mysteries of the order. In fact, Amber, you were asking earlier, you're off screen now, but it's okay, but you were asking earlier about the order, right? The order, and I was saying that the order of the gates is from the King Wen sequence. That's what it's called, is the King Wen sequence, and this guy King Wen came up with it, and that's why we give it that order. And of course it has some significance, but it's not the actual real order, so to speak. It's a human named order. Some human named these gate 1 and gate 2 and gate 3 and gate 4. There's nothing, if we had completely lost King Wen's ordering, there's nothing in the hexagrams to reconstruct it that way. Now, it is a very poetic structuring. It's a beautiful structuring. When you look at the sequence of hexagrams and you're looking at 1 and 2, and then you get to 63, 64, you realize, I mean, in some sense, it actually kind of, it starts to just peter out. When it gets to like 60, I like what Ross says about it as a joke. He goes, there aren't really 64 hexagrams. There's really only 63 but then actually there's only 62 because 63 and 64 are both outside of it. But really there's only 61 because 1 and 2 are actually the same hexagram. They're not actually that different. They're kind of, combined. They're two sides of the same one. So you really only have 61 hexagrams, which is a funny, and then you look at what number 61 is, and it is sort of the knowledge that you get. I mean, it's I guess you still get to 62. You get the details. You get the facts at the end. You get the inner. Yeah, I just love that sequence. Gate 60 is the gate of limitation, where we're limited. Then you go past the limitation. You get to gate 61, which is inner knowing. Mike has gate 61, activated with gate 24 in his chart. And then you get past 61, you get to the fax to 62. And then it's before completion and after completion. So it's just, it's definitely an interesting little sequence. Okay, well, what was the other thing? So there was another interesting little trivia fact that Mike had earlier. Gate 41, if you convert it to binary and then to ASCII.
Could I say one other thing before we get to
Sure.
Because also pointing out that 63 and 64 are the same base 3 times, just as 1 and 2 are. So you're saying those are all the ones that are excluded, and those are all the ones where it's the same base 3 times.
Yeah, that's true. If you look at, for people who want to follow along, if you look at gate 1, you'll see that in the top right of this image, you'll see that it's all yang. To the bottom left, you have gate 2, that's yin. And then if you look at 63 and 64, they are kind of the other, they're not exactly perfectly square or anything, but they're the other
They're
version.
like the stacked.
They're the stacked versions of it.
They're yin yang, and yang yin yin.
Exactly. Yeah, which is really interesting how those, and even just how those fit in, because if you look at the
Reminds me of
equidistant,
Othello.
like
Did you ever
they,
play that game?
No.
Okay.
excuse, sure, please. What game? What game?
No, it's okay.
What game? What game are you talking about?
Othello?
Yeah, I was
Oh.
saying how those two, how they alternate, remind me of Othello.
Oh,
It's
how
just a
Othello
game
would do.
that has a disc with white and black on each side.
Oh yeah. Those are the kind of the alternating ones, the Othello ones. Well, what's interesting is when you look at how gate 1 and 2 are then subdivided by their squares of 13 and 7. You would almost expect 13 and 7 to be the ones that have
Right.
the yin yang and the yang yin,
Good point.
and they don't. I mean, that's also interesting. That's also part
very
of the
interesting,
asymmetry, is that you have 1 and 2, and then you have 64 and 63. And like they're kind of like a third of the way through or something. They're kind of in an arbitrarily
Right.
interesting place offset.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely interesting when you look at the positioning of the 63-64 compared to the 1 and 2. Okay, well, let's get to. So you were saying though, the trivia.
Oh, the trivia. Just that if you translate the hexagram for 41 into binary into ASCII, if you put the hexagram into binary and then translate into ASCII, it says 1. It gives you the decimal 1, which is just funny because it's New Year, right?
Yeah, it just ends up being 1. And so by converting it to binary, it's just ones and zeros, where yen is 0, and
Yeah.
I see. And so it'd have to be a 6. Yeah, interesting. Okay, because ASCII is usually 8-bit. I wonder if the 2 bits are just remain as yen. Like you need an octagram to really do an ASCII. But it is interesting. I wonder if it just ignores, or I guess, I mean hexadecimal, like that's only 6. That would be interesting, for anyone who's done any web development where you put in, FFFF or FF or
Oh yeah.
FAA or different these different hexadecimal codes. You have 6 characters for that, and so it is interesting. I wonder what kinds of patterns you can find. Just representing, just translating gates into hex.
Right.
That would be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What color would we get for 41?
Right, exactly. 41 is going to have a hex color,
Yeah.
and I mean, I guess you just have to do F's and zeros. So I think the color, I will tell you actually,
Oh,
the
sheesh.
color is going to be FF000F. So it's going to be a lot of red and a little bit of blue. It's kind of purplish.
Interesting.
100% red, no green, and a little bit of blue. So let me, hex code maker. Let's see. Well, because why not, right? I mean, obviously, yang would be color. It would be F. It would be white, right? So I may have to do this later. This may have been too ambitious. Generate color from hex code. Yeah, no, I like these kinds of activities of just seeing, because it is a coincidence, but at the same time, everything in the Maya is somewhat translatable, so it's kind of fun to... Okay, let's try it. So, what do we got? We got FF0001.
What F, right?
There should be
Oh.
3 zeros.
Oh yeah, FF000F. So it's really just very red.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense that this would be the beginning
Yeah.
of the year. I mean, red is a very primal color. It's RGB 255015. So it's really just mostly red and a tiny little bit of blue.
It does sometimes coincide with Lunar New Year, which is always celebrated with red.
Let's see what
Yeah.
63
Not
is.
this year, though, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah, I would love to do it. You know, maybe that'll be a little project. Maybe I'll do a little hexadecimal color generator for the gates. Well, let's see if anyone has tuned in. And thank you all for watching. You know, if someone commented they've only been watching or learning human design for 5 months. Yeah, this is like a chat room. Oh, hey, Easy. Audio super low but clear. Hard to hear. Okay, well, we'll try to get the audio up. I don't know. The microphone is right here in front of us, so I think we just have to talk directly into it. I think if people talk more like this, I think, you know. Thank you, Angelique. Thanks again, Lanil. And what's up, Easy? Thank you. Oh, and hi, Sylvia. And star code activation. Oh, what's up, Feliciano? Good to see you.
Cool.
Yeah, I didn't notice you on there.
Yay.
Hope you come through soon. Hope you come through again soon. Yeah, so what else should we do for today? I think our goal was really just to talk about Gate 41. Maybe we can just go through each of the parts of the card here.
Yeah, does Jenny want to like describe her kind of thinking about like how she designed it and came up with it maybe? Like
Yeah, well, I mentioned, I just thought it would be a good place to have like these quick things because I don't know, the way I learned human design was definitely not like this. It took me a while to kind of bring all these details together, and even just like look at the center and recognizing how 41, moves from the root to the emotional solar plexus. So it is like fuel, like all the root gates are fuel. So this is, the fuel for experiences, the fuel for fantasy, pressure to seek newness, and it's harmonic is 30, so together they make the channel of recognition, which is in the sensing circuit. It's abstract and collective and part of the stream of feeling, but like kind of that pressure and hunger to experience those feelings. I actually just listened to one of Jonah's videos that he did about the channel of recognition. And something that I thought was really interesting was like this pressure to share, because that's the keynote of the collective, is to share. And with the stream of feelings, that feeling of like wanting to share, but then once you do share, it's a whole new feeling to experience. So I thought that was really profound and interesting to, that's the whole channel, but this is that fuel, that propels you for destiny, right? And I thought it was important to also include, the I Ching, which is decrease, which is what it's all based on. And I don't know, there was like, it feels like there's a sobering feeling to 41 a little bit, like if you're aware, like not having expectations, dreaming but not expecting them to happen, and feeling heartbroken if they don't happen, like recognizing the limitation to find that success and potential.
Yeah, it's there's no awareness in the 41, so a lot of times you meet people that have 41. It's very different to have the whole channel. I mean, the awareness is all in the solar plexus. So when you meet people that have the 41, especially if it's unconscious, they might have no idea. It really depends. Like, so I know a 41-5 actually, whose birthday is, I guess, tomorrow, because you are 41-6. And I'd be curious to hear your experience of it, Mike, kind of from the top, from the 6th line. But
Totally.
being a 41-5, she is constantly projected on that she has certain fantasies. And people hear the word fantasy, from psychoanalysis or whatever, you think of sexual fantasy, this or that. No, I mean, fantasy means like go on a hot air balloon. I mean, sure, it is, as the keynote, the gate of sexual hunger, and it does lead to gate 36, which is the only gate in human design that's specifically about sex. I mean, in that sense, about penetration. But gate 41, I mean, what people project on a 41-5 is more like all the touristy stuff they want to do. They project on them all of the, like, oh, someone comes to New Mexico, if a 41-2 comes to New Mexico, I bet it's more like, you should do this, but you probably won't, But a 41-5 is, oh, you must want to see this, you must want to go there, you must want to do this. It's the expectation that the other person has the fantasy. And because there's no recognition in the fantasy, remember, it takes 41-30, the channel of recognition, for the recognition to occur. That's where that whole process happens, where you have the fantasy, you get to talk about it, then suddenly it spoils it, or suddenly it's changed, or suddenly it's not the same as it was. That process only happens when the 30 shows up. 41 can sit there for years and years and years with that fantasy. The moment that they actually have it happen, it's completely changed, right? So it's an interesting thing. It's really the fuel to go out there and see what the reality is like, to go out there and meet the fates. It's the fuel to get the story started. This is the beginning of the human experiential way. And the human experiential way, of course, 41, 30, 36, 35.
Why do they call it that? What is that?
It's called the human experiential way because it's the 4 gates that are uniquely about what it is to be human, which is kind of a funny idea when you look at the 64 gates, that 60 of them don't have any specifically human quality. We have a couple comments here. Star code activation. The gate of contraction is the energy of contracting or pulling back. It is an emotional energy of regrouping in preparation for the next expansion. Yeah, maybe that's what you meant by sobering. A little bit.
That's
regrouping, collecting together. Yeah, I think of, I don't know who else has watched the new Cowboy Bebop live action remake, but Jet was always doing bonsai in the original, and he's always cutting the bonsai, and that cutting of the trees is a real classic. The pruning. Okay. I'm surprised sexual hunger would be out of the root versus the sacral, says Angelique.
I do want to note that particular note is from this circuitry book from Richard Rudd. So it's just one of his advanced keynotes. And it also has a design of fantasy within that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the sexual hunger is also talked about in Rave Anatomy and also in the sexual gates. There are only 14 sexual gates, and those are the gates coming off the solar plexus and the gates pointing at it. And so fertility is in the sacral center, but sexuality is in the solar plexus. And, it's basically, if we think of the solar plexus as opposite of the spleen, and the spleen is all about caring and survival, and, there's nothing more of a turnoff than caring. Caring is a real turnoff. When you're over on the sexual side, it doesn't really care. It's a very different thing. When you get into the keynotes of caring with the spleen, of course, all of the caring gates are the gates that point to the spleen and are hanging off the spleen. And when you get to the caring, it's something totally different. I mean, you can care about the collective, as Raj Oakes cares about everything. You can care about where to put the recycling. You can care about all sorts of things. But all of this caring, all of this nitpicking and finicky, 1858 and all of this stuff, that's not sexy. There's nothing sexy in that. Sexiness is in the experience. And what you find is the channel of talent, 1648 on the splenic side, but the channel of sexual talent is the 3635 on the solar plexus side. And of course, most people don't have that channel. The vast majority of people don't. They're shocked to find this out. They go, what? What are you talking about? I'm positive I had that channel. Okay. Star code. Definitely feel the pressure to share. Being a 6'2", authority a few years from getting off the roof. The pull to get off and share is strong. Yes, I have a hanging unconscious gate 41. Very cool, very cool. Yeah, and I would also say, while you may be experiencing a pull to share, and that's wonderful, so many sixth lines, in fact, the sixth line dream is to never come off the roof. The seven-centered sixth line never did come off the roof. Every archetype of hypocrisy, of you work so I don't have to, you experience it so I can think about it instead, you live it so I can just watch it. 100% sixth line theme. And so we're in a real transition for the sixth line where this is the first time in history the sixth line is being demanded off the roof. Demanded and pulled, kicking and screaming. And so while I've heard a number of sixth lines tell me that they're feeling the pull off the roof, I have yet to see it. Because what I actually see is a sort of pull to have their cake and eat it too. To have all of the benefits of being off the roof while still staying protected, while still staying in their safe zone. But you have to have skin in the game. So Mike is just going on to the roof. This is an interesting, he's the sixth line. He's like, skin in the game, yeah. Not going to do that for 30 years.
You have hanging 30.
Oh, Amber has gate 30 here, we've discovered.
Yeah, I have gate 30, so that means that I'm experiencing, since we're in 41, and that means I'm experiencing that channel for the first time and since last year or whatever, right?
Unless something else translates.
Unless
41.
something else,
yeah.
unless another person or something
and
else.
The moon comes once, but only for 11 hours, so we often sleep through those. But the moon gives us a little boost of each gate for 11 hours every 27 days.
Right.
And so it's interesting being 30. Being gate 30 is really being, I know people who have personality sun in gate 30 actually, our friend Taylor, and gate 30 is really...
Valentine's Day.
Oh, it is. How funny. How is that for, it's a fateful holiday then. Yeah, Valentine's is a bit of a leftover from when we used to have mating season. In fact, as part of the supremacy of the yin, when our universe sort of became gendered as yin, as female, was coinciding with this, I mean, maybe a little bit before then even, was when we basically lost mating season. And Ra basically said we lost mating season so that the yin could ascend over the yang. Because when there was mating season, the yang could still kind of control the yin in certain ways. But this was one of the last sort of like evolutionary, as soon as you can have sex at any point, sex then becomes a tool for power, on par with the yang tools for power, which are combat and domination and so on. And so essentially cooperation became viable at that point because there was this continual opportunity to reinitiate that cooperation. So it's just an interesting point. But you were saying, so gate 30 happens on Valentine's each year. Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, that's part of the human experiential way too. Go out there and meet people, to meet the other and meet the fates. Ra likes to joke about gate 30, that the gate 30 people, they're the real arbiters of fate. They don't even necessarily know it, but they're carrying out the fates. I was reading about Seth MacFarlane earlier. It was on one of those memes, who's the luckiest person in the world. You all know Seth MacFarlane of Family Guy, and comedian. You know that he was supposed to be on the plane, the first plane to hit the Twin Towers.
Whoa.
And he almost got on. In fact, the night before, he was so drunk, he had a hangover. He got there late. They put him on that flight. He missed the original flight. So they bumped him to the flight that eventually hit the towers. He was about to go on. At the last minute, he had to run to the bathroom or something, and they took off, and they wouldn't let him on.
Wow.
And then he was watching in the news, waiting for his next flight, and it happened.
Oh my God.
And so that's the fates, And the thing is, certain things happen where, the way Ra was talking about it, he said that this is the joke. The joke is we always think we know what's going to happen. We go out for groceries, and you have to call home and say, I might not be home for 2 to 4 years, You got arrested or something, and they're going to charge you, you don't know. So, or you might have to go out of the country, you might have to flee the country. I mean, look at Ra and his experiences with the fates. If you read about his world travels before he landed in Ibiza, and how he went to Israel and all of the wild stuff that happened to him. I mean, Ra had a really interesting life where he was actually, he left his whole family. I mean, he left his family. He left everything behind until people didn't know where he went. They declared him dead. He ended up in Ibiza. But the person who has gate 30, I mean, there is going to be the challenge, especially with the 41, to become aware, to really not act impulsively, but to be aware. But there is this other funny aspect of it where it's not aware. It's the arbiter of the fates. It's the tool of the fates. Having gate 30 almost, I like that everybody has roles to play, and part of the role of Gate 30 is to be fate for other people. We can almost think of some Anton Chigurh out of No Country for Old Men as like an embodiment of Gate 30. He is fate. He's the walking embodiment of fate. If you meet him, you know. Or there's that great, is it a W. Somerset Maugham short story? Do you know that one? Oh, I'll find it for people. This is a great one for fate, just because we're talking about fate. Oh, and then I see a comment. Off the Roof is great. Chilled out with no F's given. Thank you, Linnell. Yeah. Okay, so here's a great one about faith. Let's see. Short story. I'll find it. But yeah, it's interesting. So these are parts of the human experiential way. I mean, you can think of the story of Parsifal. That's another one of the classic ones. Oh, are we getting low on battery? Okay, I gotta get the other charger.
Oh, sorry.
So, I'll be back. Let's see, where do you have one? Great. But yeah, I think of the story of Parsifal, where, you know, he's living at home and he just wants to go over the hill, and he doesn't know what's over on the other side, and that's what that Gate 41 is all about. Now here's a nice story for Gate 30. This is The Appointment in Samara, as retold by W. Somerset Maugham in 1933. The speaker is Death. There was a merchant in Baghdad who sent his servant to market to buy provisions, and in a little while the servant came back, white and trembling, and said, "Master, just now when I was in the marketplace I was jostled by a woman in the crowd. And when I turned I saw it was Death that jostled me. She looked at me and made a threatening gesture. Now lend me your horse, and I will ride away from this city and avoid my fate. I will go to Samara, and there Death will not find me." The merchant lent him his horse, and the servant mounted it, and he dug his spurs in its flanks, and as fast as the horse could gallop he went. Then the merchant went down to the marketplace, and he saw me standing in the crowd, and he came to me and said, "Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant when you saw him this morning?" "That was not a threatening gesture," I said. "It was only a start of surprise. I was astonished to see him in Baghdad, for I had an appointment with him tonight in Samara." So, anyway, nice little story about fate there, how fate works.
Yes.
Easy. Oh, how I wish I kept dates better now, just so I can see if my 30 was activated during some of the amazing experiences I've had being a DJ/couch surfer. Yeah, well, I mean, that whole human experiential way, it's really propelled by that 4130. That's what kicks the whole thing off. Excellent. Well, I think we can wrap up if people are good, unless anyone else wants to talk any more about the 4130. Do you have any fun?
Well, I did have a quote that I had found on Facebook that talks about the 41. So I'll just to say it. It's the joke of the 41, you know, sitting with its fantasies, but only the not self gets sucked into that and what it brings. Chaos after chaos after chaos. It's collective. It's not personal. You're not personally loving anyone. You're not personally effing anyone.
Yeah.
You're having an experience. How are you supposed to translate that into love? You're not even thinking about the person. You're in the experience. It's only the experience that matters. That's what desire is. And back there in the root of it, as the awake being, it is the ability to transcend that, to turn it into the most impersonal perfection of love possible. That's what fantasy is. After all, when you fantasize, you create the perfection. It's all exactly the way you like. It's all exactly the way you want it. It's wonderful, isn't it? That's the magic given to us. It's the way of love that's given to us. By the way, we all share the same fantasy. We're all in the same program. That kind of love is transcendent. It's out there in what people used to call the astral. We're all connected in those realms. Oh, it's really alive. It's just different. It's just different when you're awake. One day, if I have the time, I will write an I Ching for awake people instead of the one we have now, which is for sleepers, because it's different. It's different when you're awake.
Yeah, it sure is. Thanks for that, and thanks, Ra, for those words.
I also think it's interesting when it's talking about like the perfection in the fantasies. I was reading a little bit about how the 4130 is mirroring the 5818, the judging. So like bringing in that judging function, I guess, into the feeling realm.
It shows you how lost it is, how there's no such thing as improving a relationship. There's no such thing as fixing a relationship or perfecting a relationship. All you can perfectly do is perfectly care. You can perfectly care. The perfection of caring is going to be the ultimate, caring about all the important things and so on. But that's nothing. Gate 30 is the gate of desire as well, we have to remember. And so it really shows us that desire is not something that you can strive towards and fix. And, we're in the experiential over here. It's completely experiential. It's a good point that it is the mirror image, and that people, in the not self, everything's jumbled together. For the asleep people, as Ra is calling them, who are living out their not self, it's all jumbled. And so they're looking for the perfection, just like they're trying to improve their sex life with practice. Practice, you can get better at playing piano. You can get better at playing drums. You can't get better at sex with practice. There's no practice involved. It's experiential. And experiential cannot be practiced. In fact, then you only just have the experience of practicing something. You don't have the experience of actually having it or doing it.
The rightness and the non-strategy. There's never a strategy. There's never a formula. It's different each time. Yeah, and what Mike is you're referencing is that right variable is more associated with the solar plexus and with the burgeoning new awakenings of new consciousness to the solar plexus.
Just to say exactly the channel of judgment is a mirror of this feeling stream. The focus of the stream is to recognize, to judge abstractly through a single feeling. However, the judgment is conditioned by the frequency and the wave, so it's never immediate, and it's always a process.
Yeah, and the judgment, like the fifth tone is called judgment on the personality side, and that's a right variable tone. And that kind of judgment is not the channel of judgment. It's not a judgment you make or a judgment of ordering of quantities. It's the distilled essence of an experience. And I think that's what Ra is really talking about with the 4130 is that it's going to basically, that 41 is going to have that fantasy. It's going to go out there and experience it, and it's going to have the experience of almost like even like the embarrassment of it coming out into public, or just anything changing it. And then usually what happens is as soon as it gets it, it doesn't want it anymore. The fantasy's gone because it's had the experience. And I think that's also the quote you were saying earlier from Ra, where he's talking about how it's not personal, and they're just 41 is just wanting to get the experience. It's not about the other person. If the other person leaves, they can just replace them, and it can feel really impersonal.
It's about an other person.
Yeah, it's about an other person, not the other person. And that can be really shocking. And as the not self, I mean, isn't 41 a love gate? It's a love gate.
Yeah,
Wow.
the love of dreams.
Cool.
Yeah. So it is a love gate. But it's a mundane love gate too, but it's a mundane collective love gate. So yeah, I think when Ra was talking about that love does exist, or there's a place for it, is kind of, when you're awake, you can see it as the love of the fantasy, or as the love of, essentially as love as a motivator to start the whole movement. I mean, it kicks off the entire process of going from inexperience to experience. I like to think of William Blake's tales of, or what is it?
Songs.
Yeah, songs of innocence and songs of experience. And the songs, that's mostly the 36 to the 35. Gate 36, of course, is the gate of innocence. It's the gate of crisis, and it is the crisis that happens when innocence is confronted with something for the first time. It's very much a part of that human experiential way to go from innocence to experience. You end up in gate 35 looking back on the experiences you've had. They're the ones who've been there, done that. It takes a lot for a 35 to get excited about something because they have such a, oh yeah, I've done that before.
Oh my god. That makes so much sense.
The Garden Prophet. Hello. The 41-2 hanging and 36. Quite the circuitry. Yes, it is. So for anyone that has circuitry in the human experiential way, 41, 30, 36, 35, take a look at the Neptune and Pluto transits, because we already had Neptune. So Neptune's retrograded back into 22 now, but well, it's been for a while, but it's about to go forward into 36 again. So we already had Neptune transit 36 briefly, and then it left 36, and now it's about to re-enter 36. Over the next 39 years, we're going to have a lot of Neptune-Pluto transits. I mean, I shouldn't say a lot, but they're going to be significant. They're going to be back-to-back in the human experiential way.
Wow.
Where, there's a great graphic. I don't know if I can pull it up right now, but Jan van Denberg has done this research, and that might be a good topic for next week's Human Design, because it would be... It's really interesting to see that basically what's happening is Neptune and Pluto are back-to-back, starting... And so here's what's cool. This is 2022 now. Starting in May of 2021, I think it was, April or May of 2021, is when Neptune first went into 36. Maybe even in March, but somewhere in there. And that time period of 2021, of a few months into 2021, was already talked about by Ra before his death. He already said, before 2027, you're going to get the first taste of 2027 in 2021. In March or April, whatever it is, 2021.
Whoa.
Because that's when Neptune goes into gate 36, and that kicks off the 39-year activation sequence of the transition to the post-2027 era. This is what's cool. When you get deep into human design, you start to see that so many things coincide, like 1781 with the nine-centered being and the projector and right variable coincided with discovering Uranus, Neptune with spiritualism in the 1850s, and Pluto in 1930s, psychoanalysis, and even on to Chiron, even Eris. Ra talked about Eris, and he talked about these new discoveries as having import that is not yet known, but import particularly to the right variable and to the rave, and sort of being the futuristic planets. But what's interesting is when you start to study this, you start to see that all sorts of things coincide. That the preparation for mutation, for instance, requires global warming. It requires it because at a higher body temperature and at a higher temperature, global temperature, we have more mutation. It requires cities with a large melting pot of different DNA. You start to see how all these things happen together. So 2027 is not just like the wheel turns and then suddenly we're out of the cross of planning and we're into the cross of the sleeping phoenix. It's not just that we immediately, yes, that happens, but there are all these other astronomical events that have to set it up and coincide. And so particularly Neptune-Pluto. What is Neptune-Pluto, doing? What are these doing in their 39-year back-to-back transits of the human experiential way? Well, what they're doing is they're taking turns. First, Neptune goes in and it washes away everything familiar. Neptune is a great dissolver. Think about how already, I don't know if anyone's noticed yet, people don't usually notice Neptune. You have to be really awake to notice it because it's the hidden, it's the invisible. But it dissolves things. I noticed when Neptune first transited 22, you can never tell what it's doing when it's transiting the gate. You have no idea what it's doing while it's transiting the gate. It's only when it leaves. It's like the doctor behind the curtain. It puts up a curtain, performs surgery, then Neptune leaves the gate and you go, what the heck did it do? And so it already transited 22. That was very much, and it's in 22 now, where it's been working. Yeah, it's been working on breathing. But then it went into 36, and all of us who are alive today, who are listening to this, we experienced Neptune in 36. We didn't notice it. We didn't necessarily know what it was doing, but it was doing something. And what it was doing is going to be dependent also on our level of awakeness and our personal relationship with Neptune and how we experience it. But in any case, it already transited 36, and it's already begun to dissolve our sexuality. Because what is Neptune, a 170-year cycle or something, When is the last time it dissolved old sexuality? Probably Victorian era. Victorian mores being dissolved into the kind of hedonism of the 1870s France or something like that. So now
our sexuality is being dissolved and being prepared for future sexuality, which, sorry, is extremely boring. It's extremely flat. It's extremely, I mean, we already see it in these so-called most evolved, cities and so on, Tokyo, where there's a real asexuality, real lack of sexuality. And so our old-fashioned sexuality is being dissolved through Gate 36. Then what happens is then Pluto comes along, and so each of these gates, not all in the same order, it's not like 36 it leaves and then Pluto goes in 36, but there is a sort of a pattern here, and you can see that the tolerances are within one day. It'll be like Neptune leaves one day and then Pluto enters the next.
Wow, that's bizarre.
Well, we looked at this in a previous one. This was actually, we had a great graphic on this from Jan van Denberg.
Yeah.
If someone else can talk for a minute, I'll try to find it, but I can't talk and find it at the same time. But what it's basically showing us is by 2060, we're not, our world will be completely unrecognizable. Anyone alive today, to then go forward 39 years, 38 years now, because we're a year into it, it'll be completely unrecognizable. Because Neptune is going through and dissolving all of the things that make us human, and then Pluto is going along and reinventing them. And I will say, it's nothing to be afraid of, especially for people who are into human design. Your experience is going to be so different. I mean, being in human design and, for instance, your relationship to your emotions, if you're emotionally defined, waiting for clarity, if you're not emotionally defined, not being terrified of confrontation and so on, and the deconditioning that comes from that already changes your breathing. Then Neptune comes along and it dissolves your breathing habits. Well, it's dissolving your negative breathing habits. You're holding on to the good ones. Neptune becomes your friend because you're deconditioning, because you're in the experiment. Your health is going to be unique to you, and you're not going to have these. But you can see how Neptune's in 22, how many people are having breathing problems now? How many people are dying of breathing problems now? Yeah, exactly. And you can see how Neptune is traditionally debilitating. In all traditional astrology, well, since it was discovered anyway, it was considered kind of a debilitator. And I think it is debilitating for the not-self. It's debilitating when you're an emotional person and you're not breathing through your emotions and you're acting impulsively, or when you're not an emotional person and you're terrified of confrontation, so you're constricted all the time and your breathing is bad. That's when Neptune is then bad for you, because you are in this state where you're not able to sort of experience that transit in a positive way. And now it's not to say it's anything about mental attitude. You can change your mental attitude all you want. It's not going to help. What really makes the difference is whether you're living your design or not, which is something you can only really do through, it's not a mental attitude. It's not. It's through experience. And you experience it and you get to experience, wow, this doesn't feel good, or now it feels this way or that way, or, usually with Neptune you have no idea how it feels. It's just like a veil. You have no idea anything that's going on, and then it's only after. So, but it's interesting how each of the transits can really be friend or foe, and it's not based on your mental attitude. That's the sort of mind propaganda that says, hey, with a positive mental attitude, turn lemons into lemonade. And that's not human design. That's mind propaganda. What human design says, it doesn't matter if you think it's lemons or lemonade. That doesn't make a difference whatsoever. What matters is physiologically, what hormones does your brain produce when that button is pushed? And if I'm undefined solar plexus with hanging gate 12, which I am, Neptune comes along and activates it. When that button is pushed in me, am I going to avoid confrontation and truth? Or am I going to unabashedly allow my truth to be public and let people take me or leave me? And that's the real difference. Am I going to live the not self, or am I going to live out my true design? And that's the only thing that makes a difference. And for both of you who are defined, solar plexus defined, it's your awareness of that wave that makes the difference. And it's not the mental attitude you have about it, like, oh, I'm in a bad mood, but I know I can make it. Mental attitude, there's so much propaganda that mental attitude is all it takes. And sure, it helps. I mean, I have a good mental attitude, but I see the mental attitude as, it's easy for me to have a good mental attitude because I'm not getting so much resistance in my life.
Good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I were getting resistance all the time from everyone, if people were telling me I'm wrong all the time, and why are you doing that, and that's dumb, and stop doing that, and make me this, and do that, I would not have a good mental attitude about anything.
I don't
So-
think having a good mental attitude is good though if you're like emotionally defined, because if you're too attached to that, then you're gonna be like not allowing the other parts of the wave to happen, and so you kind of need to what I've been experiencing, at least personally, this is just me, but is living more in a mid-range than like good range. Like you don't want to live in the good range because then you're gonna pull yourself, like then you're gonna have opposition to the bad, and if you're living in the bad, then the good's gonna feel uncomfortable, so you kind of want to stay more in the middle a bit so you can ride the waves a little easier.
You don't want to. I mean, from somebody who's seen, I've seen both sides. I've seen fake positive, and I've also seen, like, if people know Enneagram, like Enneagram 4 can be like everything's so negative, you know, as almost a put on of how negative it is. And yeah, I mean, and also if you're individual circuitry, I think that's where just be happy or, you know, is really dangerous, because the melancholy is so much a part of who the person is. I mean, the good news is there's no real danger of people taking anyone else's advice seriously. What ends up happening is just, you know, we just end up getting resistance because we tell the melancholy person, be happy or something, which we should never do, you know, of course. Or tell the emotional person, or the emotional person says, I'm great, and they're not great. Or the undefined person says they're great or not, you know. So all of these different, I mean, it really, at the end of the day, it almost doesn't matter if you're emotionally defined or not. Humanity's task is to figure out what to do about emotions, and to figure out how to talk about them, and to figure out how to make sense of them, you know. Humanity's task.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're the one producing them and I'm the one helping you deal with them, or whether I'm amplifying them and that gets a reaction out of you. I mean, the moment you interact with somebody emotionally, it doesn't matter if you're emotionally defined or not, you're both triggering and creating emotional waves, and you're both reacting, and you're in it. So that's a big part of what it is to be you know, alive now during what is the great transformation of the solar plexus from a motor to an awareness center.
The mothers and the midwives, the defined people and the open people.
Well, there you go. Yeah, the ones that give birth to it out in the world, and the ones that help it get out.
Yeah.
So, like 39 years of crisis in the hero's journey. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, you know, gate 36 is crisis. Really, it's going to be dissolving. You know, it's funny because in the sort of Jungian groups I've been in the past, there's a question that comes up every once in a while, which is, when are we done with the hero's journey? Is the hero's journey done? Maybe when Neptune and Pluto transited for 39 years. Maybe that's when. Maybe that's what it takes, is repeatedly dissolving and then volcanically reinventing, you know, through Plutonic, you know. So, all right. Well, thank you, Star Code Activation. Thank you, Garden Prophet. Thank you, Angelique. A lot fell apart that needs to be revamped in April. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to keep falling apart, and it's going to keep being revamped. So, Neptune and Pluto.
When does Neptune, when is it in 36 again?
Let's see. You know,
I think it's like within the few months.
yeah. Well, right. No, you mean so Neptune. Yeah, Neptune's going into Pluto into 36 really quick, and then Pluto's in 60.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Which is kind of cool, and it's
Fun.
actually fixing the detriment of 60. How
Right now?
often do
Wow.
how often do you get a Pluto fixing of an X alter a detriment? That's kind of a rare one.
We had it in the 61 last time.
Angelique says, say that again about mothers and midwives. This is great, y'all. Thanks. What Mike was just saying is that the defined centers are the mothers of the world, and the undefined centers are the midwives, who kind of help them birth things into the world. So I'm undefined solar plexus. So is Jenny. You know, we're the kind of midwives helping the defined solar plexus people birth the things out of their channels, I guess.
Because that's where the mutation is located. That's the child
Right.
in this case is the mutation of the solar plexus.
Right. That's what Mike is saying, is that he has 1949 is undergoing all this mutation right now. It's undergoing, like, even think about it, it's the channel of meat eating, but people are not eating as much meat anymore, becoming vegan, all this stuff. This mutation is occurring, just like there's a mutation in the 55.
Right. And
So,
the 6.
Oh, yeah. with the wave itself, exactly. I'm going to see if I can find one last graphic from Jan van den Berg. He's just absolutely fantastic, and he's let's see.
I wonder though, like, people who have like more Pisces in them. They, like, Neptune's the ruler of Pisces, so if you have gates that are Piscean, or like, you know, I wonder if you would like feel them more, like, because I mean I like pay attention to Neptune more instead. You know, so I wonder if those, and like, you know, stereotypically it's all kind of like dreamy and like soft edges and things like that, which is kind of like a blurring of lines a little bit when you kind of think of it out a little bit more. So maybe that's like,
I mean, also your personal connection to Neptune is going to probably change. Where what Ra talks about in the sort of magic square materials is that there really are different connotations to planets. You know, before human design, we like Neptune. We like the dreaminess of Neptune. We like escapism, dissolving into blissful forgetting. That's what Neptune is, really, the Maya. We love the Maya. We also love Mercury. We just think about all the gossip and talk shows, talk. We love Venus, and we love Jupiter. And then once we've gotten into human design, we start to mutate, and the mutation is driven by Mars. And what it does is it really begins to activate the other planets from the magic square, in addition to the moon, which kind of remains constant for both of them. But it also goes to Pluto, Saturn, and Uranus. So those three are considered really negative normally, or not really negative, but just kind of weird. You know, Pluto is kind of intense. Saturn's Saturn's the great malefic, and all this stuff. And so we have very different relationships to these. And it's kind of interesting. The more you go into human design, the less connection to Mercury you have, the less you really have to say. The less connection to Venus you have, the less you really care how it looks, and the less connection to, you know, and so on. And these kind of disconnects that happen. And Neptune, the less you really want to escape from it. You just sort of are like, I'm in it, it's fine. And then you get into, you know, you're really deep in the experiment, and like Uranus comes along and it shocks you with a sidetrack. And instead of being like, oh, what a drag, I have to do this now, you go, oh, this is where I'm going now. I didn't realize I'm going in this direction now.
Cool.
You're the sidetrack, you know, and Mars, that immature energy that would come out as anger, then starts to come out just as pure mutation. Mars is actually takes on the trait of mutation. It heats up, which causes mutation. You know, Ra hypothesized that if you were to take everybody's body temperature who's been in human design for 3.5 years or more, it'd be a degree higher than the average. He's not quite sure, but I mean, he wasn't. You know, he hypothesized. He never tested it, but he thought that their physical body temperature would raise because they were actually mutating.
Would you say there's any connection to like the idea of detoxification? Like with Neptune coming in and like kind of doing its work, and like, you know, you see kind of this like purging, and like when you're detoxifying and it's like, ugh, what is that? But
It's
really
not like heat.
you're getting it out, like, and allowing for like more health.
Yeah, it really depends the way you look at it, right? It's the same thing that seems so negative, or can be negative. Yeah.
You know, one way of getting it out with Neptune too is Neptune is also the thing that traps people in their not self lives by giving them just enough of a carrot on a stick about, in my case, success, or I suppose for a generator, satisfaction. It gives you the appearance or the illusion of things working out well, and so I suppose if you are confronted with the false image of the thing that you think you want or whatever, that's one way of getting it out. Like you attain the thing that Neptune's promising, but you attain a very thin version of it, and you realize you don't want any version of it. You know what I mean? You get the theater of it, and you no longer are interested in striving for it anymore.
Yeah, I actually have a graphic that I just put on. I'm not going to be able to find the other one, but this will be fine. And this is just a little graphic. This is Neptune, the Pluto of the not self. And I think this might be Richard Rudd. This has got to be Rudd. He wrote, over the past few years of teaching human design in the UK, I've gradually been developing unique science based entirely on the not self. As I've continued to experiment with this material, I've begun to realize it can be a great benefit to many people, and thus I find myself ready to begin sharing it publicly, yada yada. So this is Richard Rudd when he was really into HD. the essence of the not self is to be seen wherever Neptune lies in our charts. Just as Pluto represents the truth of our true self, Neptune reveals our deepest delusions. Whichever gate or gates Neptune activates in your design, there is where you think your truth is. Ironically, most people never get to live out their real truth in Pluto because it lies concealed by Neptune, the great god of veils and traps. To the left, you see the Neptune activations of George Bush and Saddam Hussein. Well, this was the early 2000s.
Classic example.
Yeah. George Bush thinks he is here to correct and improve the world. Oh, I see. He has his Neptunes in gate 18. So his delusion is that he's here to be the one to tell us how to fix everything. But his Pluto is in 33. So he thinks he's here to correct and improve the world for the sake of our common future by challenging authority. His lines carry a deep irony. The incompetent, 18.4, and the zealot, 18.3. Doesn't take a rocket science to combine those two words. Saddam Hussein thinks he is here to resolve the oppression of his own past. 47 and the 64.
Nice.
That's pretty good. 47 oppression and 64 is the past, yeah. His lines also carry the same painful irony. Ambition, 47.2, and victory, 64.6. Those of you who are brave enough can look at both men's Plutos to see what should have been. Well, George W. Bush was a manifester, and he went on to be a painter, so I think we know what his Pluto was. his Pluto is some art thing. To see what they should have been if you can bear not to wince. Bush is here to surrender. I see. And Saddam is here to be discovered as a genius. Sadly, on account of neither man ever knowing his true strategy and authority, all that the world ever sees is the two not-self themes locked in mortal combat. The final irony is that if you are able to live out your own truth, your Neptune then becomes your greatest gift for others, rather than something you think you must attain for yourself. I encourage you all to have a look to see in your own charts what you think it is that you're seeking in life.
That's very nice.
Only when you let go of this dream can you truly be yourself.
Oh,
Oh, my Neptune is 58.
Yeah?
Yeah. The gate of the joyous.
Well, yeah, but it's not just joy. It's improving things, and it's logic and experimenting, and it's a lot of things. I mean,
caring enough about life to want to improve it. It's not. Well, never mind. I was just gonna say the whole Pluto Neptune thing. You can kind of see that in the magic square if you go clockwise for any of them. Like Uranus is the antidote to Mercury, Moon is the antidote to Venus, and whatever the other one is.
Like they influence each other as you go around it.
Saturn is the antidote to Jupiter, punishment and law, right? Constraint and law.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I think we're good for now. To be continued. Lots of great conversations. Shout outs, easy. I don't know about body temperature raising, but I do know for sure that electronics don't like an awakened body. I've heard this again and again, especially if you have
That's pretty good.
5th and 6th tones. If you're on Facebook and you do have 5th and 6th tones, check out James Alexander's Solar Plexus Binary group. Easy. My design Neptune is in 11.6. It's my only 6th line in my chart. Exalted. I'm not even sure what to think of that. Yeah. No, that's a great one. I have 11. Were you born in 1983? Easy. Because I have that as well. And the way I look at it is that when I was younger, I was in a lot of startups. They say gate 11 can just make fortunes on stocks and things like that. And I still do some, but that's not my it's mostly for other people. Like we started a stock club this past week, and I like to, it's not my life purpose. My Pluto's in gate 50. It's more about responsibility, and I have to know what my responsibilities are and face those responsibilities and become wise about those responsibilities and so on. And so really becoming wise in the spleen is much more my life purpose. So 48 Pluto for Garden Prophet. Yeah, a perfect place for Pluto. Lynell, thanks all. Thank you. And thanks for the great question. Easy. Yeah, like 6 months before me. Very cool. Well, you probably have Uranus conjunct Jupiter as well because it conjuncted 3 times that year.
Electrons don't like ghosts.
Oh, what's up, Jose? Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and till next time. Thank you. And yeah, let's hear it for Jenny.
Yay,
Good work, Jenny.
It's here for all of us.
All right.